So everybody, welcome to Access Replay. My name is Allie Young. I'm the CEO and founder of this wonderful establishment, and thank you for coming to visit. When Keith brought this event to me, I thought, what a great opportunity for us to really talk and share about what we go through as CEOs and founders of our companies. How many of you guys are, raise of hand or show of hands, how many of you guys are founders and business owners? Great. I probably should have done some breathing exercises from Lindsay before I got up to talk. Um, I, I wanted to share a couple of things with you. So Access Replay has been in existence for 13 months now. We opened on New Year's Eve of last year, and it has been a journey. So prior to this, I was also, I own my own marketing firm, and this was the first time that I had raised funds. Also created a space like this that had so much overhead that it needed funding, right? And, you know, when we're talking about mental health and wellness, as a CEO, I never really thought that any of those issues applied to me. And when I started this company, really started to notice the toll that it takes. So recently, I'll share this with you guys. I've been trying to do some relaxation techniques and things like that. And part of the things that I like to do on my off time is watch watch anime with my daughter, with my 13-year-old daughter. So there's this one that we've been watching recently, and it's the craziest thing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's called Haiku, and it's about this team that plays volleyball. So anyway, I relate to this. I relate to this show because it really talks about. It's about this team that tries really hard, and the main character in the show is like 5 foot tall, right? And he plays volleyball. So if you know, the sport of volleyball usually requires some height, but he can jump like a crazy person. And one of the things that I really enjoy about this is that his grit is amazing. And I want to share this with you guys because I kind of relate the story of his team and their battle to win the national championships, right? Nobody believed process of playing these and in practice and practice matches and things like that. But when they got down to it, they won, and they are winning. I haven't gotten to the end yet, but they've been winning their actual nationwide like competitions. So I kind of related the story of Access Replay to this whole process because in the past year, we spent a lot of time losing. And the mental toughness that you have to have in order to come back from each time there's a loss is tremendous. And I mean, I'm going to tear up now just to kind of share because it's been a rough 13 months, right? Um, when you look at our social media, you look at the press around what we've done here, it's been tremendous. And I could talk in all day on and on about that. But really wanted to share with you guys just the, you know, you're not alone. And finding your tribe. I mean, it's shit that I can't even talk about with my significant other, with my husband, a lot of times, or you know, when you have to let go of people, or they quit on you. I mean, it's heartbreaking, right? You care about them so much, and you care about people, and you get into this business to make a difference, and it's difficult. So give me a hug after. Well, no hugs because coronavirus. But just know that you're not alone. And thank you so much to Keith and the Techstar groups for putting this together for us and really enabling and helping us with opportunities to speak with each other. So thank you. Sorry.
Hey everyone. That was beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys all for coming out. Mental health is not always an easy topic to show up for. So yeah, just thanks for showing up for yourself and for this event. Thanks to Access Replay and Techstars for having me tonight. My name is Lindsay Harrington, and I am the founder of Embody Soul Healing. I work with clients on their wellness, self-care, stress management through yoga, breathwork, and meditation. So I am a certified yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, and Reiki master, and I am also a project management professional. So I've been in the healthcare industry for the last 8 years. I've worked at large Fortune 500 companies. I've worked at startup companies where I'm full-time hire number 10, and I'm also the founder of my own business. So I've just experienced, all the struggles that we all go through in terms of growing our business, growing ourselves professionally, personally, and just trying to meld all of that together so that we have, just a better experience at work, at home, with others. And, I've been practicing yoga since 2005, and being in the corporate world, working in startups, working on my own business is what really drove me to share a lot of these like self-care practices with others. So I know a lot of you are probably familiar with traditional yoga that you see at a studio, yoga asana. Meditation's been gaining prevalence in the last few years, but today I wanted to talk to you guys about breath work, because that's a modality that is really just starting to gain traction. And I think that there's a lot of questions out there about what breath work is, how it can help you. And I'm really passionate about breath work because you literally don't need any sort of fancy tool or supplement in order to take care of yourself. You literally just need time and space and your own breath. So breath work is really a broad term for any sort of conscious breathing. So you're bringing awareness to your breath, to your body, and you're using specific techniques and patterns in order to, affect your nervous system, calm the mind, and bring awareness back to your body. So I group the main types of breath work into active breath work and calming breath work. So active breath work is going to pull in more oxygen. It's going to be a more vigorous practice. And that's usually done in a more therapeutic setting where you have a certified practitioner working with you, because it can often bring up strong emotions. People can process trauma, any sort of subconscious programming that they're working on around self-expression or self-compassion or self-love. It's really endless, the things you can work on with breath work. And then there's also the secondary form, which I'll call calming breath work. And that type actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's your rest and digest. It's going to ground the body, calm the mind, and it'll bring you back into more mindfulness and alignment. So that's the kind that I think probably most of us are familiar with just through yoga classes or meditation. You might have heard it called pranayama. And really, that's the type of thing you don't need to be certified in. You don't need any sort of special tools. You can literally just take a few minutes every day, maybe a couple times a day, and use the breath work to really calm your body, bring you back into the present moment, really honor what you're feeling, and understanding what you need in that moment. So something so simple that we always have access to can be really so powerful. So what I want to do today with you guys is just to do a simple breathwork practice. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to close your eyes. Just find a comfortable seat if you're at home or if you're in a chair. You can Maybe put one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, and just take a moment to feel into your breath. Noticing how it feels in your body. Is it measured? Does it feel fast? Are you feeling the breath in your chest? Does it extend down to your lower belly? If you have one hand on your belly, just maybe breathing in deeper, noticing your belly expand, drawing air down all the way into your lower abdomen. Culturally, we are a bunch of chest breathers. That's the unofficial term. But we often don't bring our breath down into our lower belly. And by drawing it all the way down, we're engaging our diaphragm, which is actually working with our psoas and our autonomic nervous system. So when we do our deep belly breaths, it's actually telling your body that you're safe, that you can slow down, you can take your time. Even if your head is still spinning, by doing those deep belly breaths, you're actually on a physical level telling your body that you are okay. And now we'll just keep our eyes closed and go through a quick body scan. This is a great way just to move through your body, noticing how you're feeling. So I'm going to name different parts of the body, and as I do, I'd like you to draw your awareness there and try to not approach it with judgment. Nothing's good or bad. Just noting if there's any sort of tension in that space and just allowing it to release. So starting at the crown of the head, the space between the eyebrows, the space between the neck and the collarbone, your right shoulder, right elbow, right wrist, right thumb, pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, little finger, right wrist, right elbow, right shoulder, center of the throat, left shoulder, left elbow, left wrist, left thumb, pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, little finger, left wrist, left elbow, left shoulder, center of the throat, center of the chest, navel point, center of the pelvis, right hip, right knee, right ankle, right big toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe, right ankle, right knee, right hip, center of the pelvis, left hip, left knee, left ankle, left big toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe, left ankle, left knee, left hip, center of the pelvis, navel point, center of the chest, center of the throat, space between your eyebrows, and the crown of the head. And let's all just take a deep breath in together. And exhaling out of the mouth, a loud audible sigh, just releasing any tension. Taking a moment to notice how it felt to bring awareness to your body. Noticing how your body's feeling. If you're tired, rested, feeling any aches or pains, and Just letting that be okay with whatever you're feeling in this moment. And now we will start a breath pattern. I'll count you off. You can keep your hands at your chest and belly if that's comfortable, or you can let them rest on your lap, on your knees. First, we're going to inhale to a count of 5 and exhale to a count of 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Keep inhaling to a count of 5 at your own pace. Just letting your mind lightly attach to the number. And you can always modify the count to fit your body, your breath. If you need to inhale to a count of 4, exhale to a count of 4, feel free to always adapt for what feels right for you. What we're doing with this breath pattern oftentimes when we breathe through, we do not fully exhale. So by having this measured breath, we're letting our body again just relax. We take the edge off of our nervous system. We come back into balance. And now we're going to switch up the count so that we'll still inhale to a count of 5, but we will exhale on a count of 8. So again, if you need to do 4 and 6 or 5 and 9, the point is here is we want to extend our exhale longer than our inhale. So starting off with an inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, continuing at your own pace, just trying to lengthen your exhale, feeling yourself empty out all of the air out of your chest, out of your lower abdomen, just finding that place of emptiness in your belly before you move to the next inhale. By extending our exhale, again, we're further letting our body know that it's time for rest, that you're safe. You're releasing the stress from your body, from your nervous system, and just letting some of that tension melt away. And you can release the count, returning to a natural breath. And before we open our eyes, maybe just taking a note of whether you feel any different than when we began. Maybe you feel a little less resistance in your chest. Maybe you've released a little bit of the anger or stress that we pick up when we have to fight the Atlanta traffic or close out a day's work. And gently opening your eyes whenever you're ready. And if you want to start with some of this breath work, which I call breath work for self-care and stress management, because it's so simple, you really just need 3 to 5 minutes within your day. You can set an alarm for around lunchtime, like sometime you know it's not going to be interrupted. And it's a really great reminder to like check in with your body and your breath. The founder of Alchemy of Breath, who facilitates a lot of breathwork trainings around the US and internationally, he calls breath a system of measurement for how we're doing in this present moment. And that's the beautiful thing about breathwork is, you know, mentally you can convince yourself that you're somewhere else, but if you can barely catch your breath, you have pounding in your chest, you can't seem to get a deep breath, it's a sign that, you know, your body needs a little bit of more tender care. And I think that we work in such a fast-paced environment. If we can just find 3 to 5 minutes in the middle of our day to focus on the breath, it can make the world of difference. The more you practice this diaphragmatic breathing by pulling air deep into the belly and extending your exhale, you actually over time can change the pattern of your breath. So it can improve your respiratory health, which I think in the current climate, we'd all love to have an improved respiratory system. So yeah, that is it. And I will turn it over to Nate, who's going to introduce our main speakers of the night. But again, my name is Lindsay Harrington, and thank you guys for having me tonight.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up? Perfect. Well, I am Nate Schmidt, the Managing Director of the Techstars Alabama Energy Tech Accelerator. I'm coming to you from Birmingham, Alabama. Sorry I couldn't make the trip over, but very pleased to be here today. And very pleased to introduce David Cohen and Brad Feld. One of the reasons I joined Techstars, there they are. David, maybe we'll see if Brad comes in. Maybe, maybe not. We at least have David. One of the reasons I joined Techstars is because as an organization, it's a group that really cares about founder wellness. It cares about, it's very founder first, and it's something that I care a lot about as well. So I'll stop there, introduce David and Brad, and looking forward to talking a little bit about wellness tonight and answering some of your questions.
Thanks, Nate. Hey, everybody. Great to be with you, and sorry it's virtual, but these are the times we live in. I think Brad is there somewhere in the frame and introduce himself. But
Hi, can you hear me?
You are there. Yeah. Hi, Brad.
Oh, no, all my videos not showing up. I was put in like some room, quarantine room.
Ah, well, at least you have books. That's good.
Can you see me?
No, you're off. Well, yeah. There you go. Now I see you. So we're supposed to introduce ourselves. So David Cohen, one of the founders, along with Brad and others, and a managing partner at Techstars, and excited to hang out with y'all and take it wherever we want the conversation to go this evening. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, hi, everyone. Brad Feld. I have been enjoying being on this journey with David for a long time. And it's a delight to be able to spend some time with you, even though it's virtual. I'm one of the co-founders of Techstars. I'm also a partner at Foundry Group, which is a venture firm based in Boulder that invests all around the US. And I also ran, what was it called? Brad's Big Deals or Brad's Greatest Deals with Nate's first company. So we had some fun with that. Brad's Amazing Deals.
Brad Feld's Amazing Deals.
Brad Feld's Amazing.
Nate, maybe you should share your background with Techstars and go back in time for people so they have the context.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a multi-time startup entrepreneur. In 2010, I participated in Techstars Seattle. That was back when Techstars had had 3 programs, and now we have 48 programs, including the new Birmingham program. I'll tell you a quick story if you're asking me for some stories. My third day at Techstars, I had a meeting with Brad, and it was a virtual meeting much like this. And I was really nervous about the meeting. I was just here from Alabama. I was nervous about the Techstars meeting, nervous about my Brad meeting. And so I went up to David, and I was a little scared of Brad, to be honest. So I went up to David, who was sitting in the office, said, "David, meeting with Brad, a little bit nervous about it. Do you have any pointers?" And David said, "Well, I'll just go join up with you in the meeting. Brad's easy to talk to." And all the blood left my body as I was terrified to go talk to Brad and have to do it in front of David. So this is the first time I think we've all 3 been together since then. I've grown up a little bit, hopefully, but yeah, I thought I like in a conversation about stress and founder wellness, put the stress on me so that you don't have to be stressed out at all.
Cool. So Keith, are you out there as well? I see you. Okay. You're being silent if you
Can
are.
anyone see me?
Yeah, we see you. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining us, guys. So one way we could take this is mental health and wellness tips from you all when it's time to shut a company down. When you've pushed hard for years and it's just not going the way that people wanted to see it go. You get to that tough point where it's time to shut it down. Do you have any advice to talk some people through that? Because we know a few founders who are in that situation right now. I think it'd be pretty helpful for them.
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's how we like to roll. We'd rather have a conversation than just talk about random stuff that we want to talk about. So thank you for that. Yeah, look, I mean, companies shutting down, it didn't work out like we want it to. I think the first thing to recognize is that's most of the time, right? So, most of us aren't going to have that perfect outcome and have everything be great in the end, right? A lot of things are not going to work. And I think that's obviously, part of the process. That doesn't make it any easier, obviously, but I think that what I've seen, and just for context, about 2,000 Techstars companies now, and we've certainly seen plenty of them not work and people struggle with that. People sometimes will, internalize all of that blame. They're feeling that, they didn't return money to their investors, that they let down employees and customers, and they sort of internalize it all to themselves and sort of want to take that blame. And I think when I hear that, I usually ask them to take a step back and say, look, you ventured out into doing a startup, which took an incredible amount of bravery. And, your investors have all been invested in things that, have worked or haven't worked in many cases. And they went into it with their eyes wide open. And so, the healthy thing to do in those moments is to have those conversations with people. And I think, what I've seen is that entrepreneur gets typically just an incredible amount of support. It's okay. We know you gave it your all and did everything you could. And I think when you just internalize it and you imagine how other people are feeling, it's often worse than you might find in reality. So I would just encourage people in that situation to recognize that that's part of what can happen and that there's probably a support system around you, and just having those conversations can be really cathartic.
Yeah, I'll tell a personal story that sort of talks to that, about a company I had invested in around 2000, 2001, in that time frame, maybe a little on the early curve of the internet melting down. And I was an investor, and we were the largest shareholder in a company that a close friend was the CEO of. He had started a company that had exited in 1997. I was an investor in that company. He started another company in 99. And the second company just never really took off. And he raised a decent amount of money, maybe $10 million total. He had a good vision. He executed well. He tried really hard. And the business itself wasn't really working, and then the internet bubble on top of it was just another layer of pressure. And I could tell he was, incredibly stressed. He had done a riff and cut the company down from whatever its peak was down to about 20 people. He had done another riff and cut the company down to about 10 people as he then, pivoted with the money he had left to try to do something else. And he had maybe $1 million of the $10 million left. And we were talking one afternoon, and he was very ramped up. Like, you could really tell this is a relatively calm guy. His stress level was, on the stress-o-meter, was 10. His name was George. And I said, George, what's up? Like, why are you, what's going on? He's like, I just don't want to lose your money. I'm just willing to try this other thing this one more time because I just don't want to lose your money. And I said, well, don't think about it that way. You've got $1 million left. Are you willing to spend the next 12 months of your life investing that $1 million in a new thing, this new vision of yours, to try to generate something that has potential outcome? Or would you rather just distribute the $1 million back to your investors and call it a day? Like, just wind the thing down, and I'll get 5 or 10 cents on the dollar back, but you can move on. I said, you don't have an obligation to me as an investor. I invested knowing that there was a non-zero chance that I'd lose all my money. And so rather than make a real-time decision, why don't you go home? Why don't you have dinner? You have a relatively new wife. Why don't you have dinner with your wife? Why don't you talk about whether it's worth investing the next year of your life in this thing that you've now sort of concocted as version 3 of this company? And any answer is totally okay with me. Yep, let's go for it, or no, let's not. At the end of that, the next morning he called me up and he said, let's wind down the company. So as the entrepreneur, if I, as the investor, hadn't given him permission to do that, my guess is he would have just in an obligatory way played it out for a year. And if I hadn't had the self-awareness when he was really stressed to say, what's going on, George? It might never have come up. But it's something to think about, is that, did he feel bad about shutting the company down? Yes. Was it hard to shut the company down? Yes. But what happened next was awesome. So he took about 6 months off, and then he started a new company that I invested in. And that new company ended up being incredibly successful. I think I made about 50 times my money in that new company. And within, again, 6 months, so he would have spent the whole year and he wouldn't have started this new company because he would have been working on the other thing. The new company, by the way, had absolutely nothing to do with the first company. So just this notion as the entrepreneur of knowing, get rid of the constraints that are talking to you and saying you can or can't do this, or I don't want to let these people down, or I don't want to disappoint these people. Let go of those constraints and then try to make a rational, forward-looking decision about whether or not you want to keep running the business. And if you do, great. And if you don't, deal with that head on and directly rather than torture yourself.
So one thing I'm always conscious of, and I think maybe would be useful, and if I'm right, maybe the audience could do a thumbs up or a thumbs down if I'm wrong. Would it be helpful to hear a little bit about each of our own experiences with sort of mental well-being, just sort of what the context is that we're bringing? Because we get asked to talk about a lot of stuff, and we try to put together a group of people. I guess I see some thumbs up. So maybe just whatever people are comfortable sharing. There's another one. Thank you. Brad, and then Nate, and then I'll go. But just, for context so that people sort of know maybe what some of our own experiences are.
Sure. I'm happy to go first. I've been very public about this and my own struggles with anxiety and depression, probably going back to around, I started talking about it publicly probably about 2013. And the thing that motivated me to do that was a reaction that I had to a number of high-profile entrepreneurs that in a very short period of time committed suicide. And there was a lot of conversation all of a sudden about it because of these three entrepreneurs. And it was also during a time period that I was going through a depressive episode. And I felt like because I was very public with my blogging and my writing and a lot of the talking that I was doing, I felt like I was being very inauthentic and kind of bullshitting myself if I wasn't willing to be open about what was going on with me. My own struggles around anxiety and depression date back to early 1990s when I was running my first company. I had three things that happened at about the same time that tipped me into a depressive episode. One of them was I was in a PhD program while I was running my company, and I was a terrible PhD student, and I got kicked out of the PhD program. Second is I had married my high school girlfriend, and it was good for like 3 days. And so we didn't have any kids, so we ended up splitting up, and I got divorced sort of at 23 or so. And then the third was I was running my business, which was doing well, but I was very bored. I was very bored of the work, and I wasn't really stimulated by what was going on. And I think the combination of the stressors around all three of those things, especially having two things be real visible failures, my marriage and my PhD program, tipped me in. It turned out that during that period of time, I was incredibly ashamed of being depressed. I couldn't really talk to anybody about it. I couldn't talk to my parents. They were profoundly unhelpful whenever I tried to talk to them about it. I ended up going to see a psychiatrist. I started taking medication. I ended up getting a clinical diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. And the therapy that I did during that period of time was really, really helpful to me, not just then, but also in terms of my whole life arc. But I had this incredible shame. Like as a CEO and a leader of a company, I had to see a therapist. I had to take medication. Like just, it was a very negative, counterproductive dynamic for me personally. I was very fortunate that my business partner in that first company was, well, he didn't really know what to do with the depression that I was struggling with. He was very empathetic, and as a person, we were very close friends, and so we navigated through that reasonably well. My now wife, Amy, who was a friend of mine, who during this depressive episode became my girlfriend after my first marriage blew up, was also great. She didn't view me as a broken thing she had to fix. It was much more of she knew me and had known me for a long time, so it was more of a cycle of the experience that I was having. If you wind that clock forward, I had another major depressive episode around 9/11. I was in New York on 9/11. I was never in harm's way, but it freaked me out. I had a lot of PTSD from it. I had a 24-hour period where I was really, really, really rattled. And the end result of all of that is I had another 3-month sort of very deep depressive episode that coincided with the collapse of the internet bubble. So I think the primary stressor was the collapse of the internet bubble, and then 9/11 tipped me into this depressive episode. And then again, in this 2013 time period, if you look at my life from the outside looking in, my life was going great. I had great marriage, great relationship with Amy. Foundry was going great. Other business things that I was involved in, my portfolio, Techstars. Personally, I was healthy. And externally, it didn't look like there was anything that could possibly be wrong, but I had really worn myself out. I physically and physiologically wore myself out over the course of 2012. And then I ended up having a medical issue at the end of the year, kidney stone that I had to have surgery for. And, I thought I recovered, but just the load of all of the things over that period of time, again, tipped me into depression. So, I come at this from the standpoint from that 2013 time period forward, which is accepting that the outcomes or the outputs of stress of an entrepreneur, as well as many of the challenges that we all have in our lives, often generate lots of episodic mental health issues, again, anxiety or depression. And then, many people have real clinical disorders, mine being OCD, some people are bipolar, some people have mania. some people are borderline personality disorder. And there's an enormous stigma still associated with this in our society and in entrepreneurship. And from about 2014 on, I decided that part of what I would try to do with being public is put some effort into lowering this stigma and ideally eliminating the stigma. If you study history of any of these things, cancer used to have an enormous stigma associated with it. If you had cancer, people stayed away from you. For those of you that remember or had friends or a family member or somebody that that has HIV or had HIV or AIDS in the 80s, enormous stigma around both HIV and AIDS. We're living in this all of a sudden today, right? Like where people are pretty freaked out about coronavirus. I'm freaked out about it. I'm trying to be as rational as I can in the context of it, by looking at sort of the data and understanding about it. But there's already, you see many behavior patterns that generate or behaviors that have stigma associated with somebody who's either infected or come in contact with somebody or potentially could have been from a place that has higher risk, which is just more of this extension of these pressures that we face as humans. So that's my experience with it. And I don't profess to know the answers. I don't try to assert to people that they should behave a certain way or they should do a certain set of things. Rather, I try to offer experiences that I've had in ways that I've navigated through whenever I talk about issues around mental health.
Nate, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I think startup founders kind of face an interesting double whammy. The type of people that are kind of drawn to being entrepreneurs, maybe it's our active minds. I know that's, with me, my mind always seems to be going, or the types of people that are prone to stress, anxiety, depression. And then being startup founders is, it's a really stressful job. And so it's taking people that are prone to issues with wellness and putting them in a job that doesn't lend itself to wellness sometimes. That's been my experience. And so this is my second time to be involved with an accelerator. I started the Velocity Accelerator in 2017, and we went through a pretty difficult issue during our accelerator. One of our founders committed suicide during the program. He shot himself. And that was difficult, to say the least, for our entire class, for his family, in all the ways you would think. And so since that happened, we chose to go on as an accelerator, and I really started looking inward about wellness and wanted to make sure that any mentoring I did moving forward was, really with wellness in mind. And so it caused me to realize that I have dealt with depression, that I continually deal with issues related to stress and anxiety as a founder. And so I work to deal with it. And so one of the ways I've worked on it is by speaking on this topic to groups of startups. I've been doing that for the last several years. And one thing that's always really top of mind for me is kind of the difference in the emotional versus the rational. I teach, Brad just spoke about it, like do your startup, make rational decisions. If you lose someone's money, it's okay. Brad said it, or David said it, that most startups fail, which is true. And that going in, but I would have never thought that my startup would fail. But I've failed as a startup founder before, and it's been extremely hard, and it's led to depression. I know for 100% fact that rationally that I played no role in what happened in our previous accelerator, but emotionally, I always will wonder, I wish I could have had one more conversation. So I think a lot about what we teach, how entrepreneurs really feel, and most of it began for me, my journey began with the loss of one of our founders in our class. So that's where it comes from for me.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, and I remember talking to you during that time. I think both Brad and I talked to you, and obviously very, very hard and unfortunate. You know, I think for me, you know, Techstars, I mentioned earlier, right? It's 500 new companies a year. You know, that's probably 1,500 founders a year. You know, 2,000 already in the portfolio. So we've, you know, we've seen our fair share of these sorts of challenges. And I think overall, you know, you might expect to see even more than we have seen. And then when you extend the network out into alumni and friends and their endeavors, you know, we just run into this a lot. And so I've had the benefit of being around some really amazing advice and watching people jump in and help, and have learned from that. But personally, you know, I have two people in my essentially, you know, close family that have struggled with these types of issues for a long time, and sort of having that in the family is hard. And you know, one is schizoaffective disorder. And the other is just, you know, sort of anxiety and depression. And, you know, that's been my experience, is more sort of in the family, and then in my broader work family, just seeing, and, you know, there's usually not a month that goes by that, you know, there's not some sort of challenge where we're trying to help people and provide resources. So that's my context. We're getting a couple questions now, which is awesome. Maybe that was a good idea to share those things. I don't know if I should read them off the Q&A, or Keith, did you want to handle that? All right, I'll do it. So the first question is, can you please share tips on how founders can maintain sanity during and after the fundraising process, especially as a first-time founder? Being in the middle of the fundraising process myself, I know that this can be another source of stress. And, you know, I think for first-time founders, maybe especially so, because you sort of see your whole company riding on that and you've never been through it before. So I guess one reaction I have to it is, you know, the more experience you can bring around you, the better. And not just for tactical support, but for emotional support. So that is a role, you know, we play a lot. Companies often want to raise money in the context of our accelerators, and you know, we help them a lot with tactics, and we're trying to help a lot more with that emotional support. In fact, you know, Techstars has a video series coming out in May for everyone to consume that sort of dives into some of these things. But you know, to me, it's just surrounding yourself with people that can give you that emotional support, who you can talk to, who've been through it before, that I think can help a lot. So I don't know, Brad or Nate, anything to add there?
I'd add that I don't think that it's unique. The essence of the question made me think of this, and it's not unique to the fundraising process, because the question was, I don't remember whether it was before, during, or after, but it was kind of during and after, or something like that. Like, the same things that apply whether you're fundraising or not. And fundraising is just another flavor of intense stress that has an uncertain outcome, where there are some very specific things you can do about, you know, and for yourself. And I think the person used the word sanity, which I like. But you know, at the same time, you know, question whether you actually are able to really separate the stress from your normal experience, and recognize that when you have these stressors, whether it's fundraising, whether it's end of quarter sale, whether it's sale of your business, whether it's a, you know, an existential crisis that's really dramatically affecting your company, as a leader, one of the most powerful things you can do is stay calm and be as thoughtful as you can through this process as you make decisions, because the more ramped up you get, the harder it is to make clear decisions. And part of staying calm is taking care of yourself. And I don't mean the word calm specifically. Let's use it as quotes around it, right? Whatever your sort of natural emotional state is. And I think the thing that's most impactful that I've learned to do is essentially being labeled today self-care, right? Whatever it is that you need as a person so that you feel emotionally healthy and emotionally sound, especially against the backdrop of a lot of stress. For me, exercise is super important. If I'm not running regularly, it adds up in a negative way. As I've gotten older, sleep is really important. I used to be, that person that woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning every morning, no matter where I was. And, now I get regularly, 8, 9 hours of sleep a night. And I relish it. It really, if I get 5 hours of sleep or 4 hours of sleep, for some reason, it's really a dramatic negative impact on me and how I do. There's many other things, that you can do in that context, whether it's, meditation, time with spouse, time with kids, taking a day a week and really being disconnected, so doing a digital Sabbath or something that gives you distance, whatever it is, making sure that you're, especially in times of enhanced stress, giving yourself some time for yourself on a regular basis that helps restore you.
One thing that I would add, there was actually a Foundry investment, Brad, that had an impact on me in regard to this. I don't know, in 2012 maybe, you made an investment, and the founder, like right after the investment closed, went to Paris with his wife. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way I just raised money from Foundry that I would go to on a trip. I need to be working. And I've come to realize as I've gotten older that, and hopefully better at this, and it's really a core mantra for me, that taking care of yourself is the work. That oftentimes we choose, like, can I go on vacation, or do I need to be working on my company? And the answer is that going on vacation is working on your company, that you have to be at your best. And so should I work out or should I work on my company? Should I eat well or work on my company? It's all, if you're a founder, your mood infects the entire mood of the company, and all of that for me is the work. And so I really view it holistically, that the trips that I take and the time that I spend on myself as a startup founder is the work. And it's been, a few things that have gotten me to that point, but that investment in Foundry was one of them. I think you'd say, Brad, you weren't pissed at the founder because he went on vacation. Maybe you were.
Nope. And, I have this regular conversation with founders, who I see not taking vacation. And, I don't insist that anybody do anything, but I encourage them. And occasionally I say, somebody will say, I'm going on vacation next week, but don't worry, I'll be connected. I'll be checking email. I'm available if anything comes up. And my response is, go the fuck on vacation. Like, go away for a week. And if everything falls apart, that's a problem. That's a problem not because you went on vacation. That's a problem because you don't have a team that can actually let you go away for a week. That's a problem because you haven't set up a company, and even if you're very small, that you haven't set up a rhythm of a business that can allow you to get some time for yourself. The second order of that is most people say, well, it's not that. They can certainly deal with it without me, but I'd be more anxious if I disconnected for a week and didn't check in. And I understand that because it took me probably about 4 years of going on vacation once a quarter with my wife, Amy, where she insisted that I get off the grid. So no phone, no email for a week. And it probably took 4 years before I felt comfortable doing that. And, that was 20 years ago or something like that, 15 years ago that I finally got comfortable with it. And it's hard, and you have to change your mindset around what it means to be always on, always connected, and how you interact with things, and sort of what feeds you in terms of dopamine and feeling important, and your own self-image of, the world's going to collapse if I'm not around. All of which have positive attributes, but the negative attribute of it is that it inhibits you from allowing yourself to rest and restore and think clearly long-term about what you're trying to do.
Brad is a prolific book author, and I'll promote one of his books here. So Startup Life, Surviving and Thriving in a Relationship with an Entrepreneur, that he and his wife, Amy, wrote. I remember in that book, writing a piece that was additive to it. And it was something like, always have something to look forward to, always have a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's an example of a rhythm that you can create in your life to, for example, always have a vacation planned, right? When you're done with one, know when your next one is. And when it gets stressful and it impacts your family, or your friends or the company, you know that there's this thing that you're looking forward to, that it's not just, you're on the treadmill and there's no way off it. And I think that can be a technique that maybe is helpful too. Brad, that's just one of your 1,427 books that I thought I would mention.
Thank you.
They're all behind you there on the shelf.
Salesman David. Available at all good online bookstores.
Fire with the next one.
So I've got one. The Startup Life book. Brad, thanks, dude. You and Amy did us a big favor with that. My wife and I have started with the life dinners, and man, those things are tough. Melissa's over here, and she's held us to the cadence. Every single month we get together and we talk about tough stuff. Yeah. Any tips, or is it just always going to be tough?
Well, what I said, it seems like I got cut off. I said, good job, Alyssa, so keep it up. Is it always tough? No, it's not always tough, but here's the dynamic. Amy and I have been doing this now every month since sometime around 2000 or 2001. So what is that? 12 times 20, 200 plus dinners. And I would say they tend to fall into two categories now that we've been doing it for a long time. This is, for those of you that don't know what Life Dinner is, this is, I'm going to assume that most of you know how Agile software development works. It's basically a combination of a retrospective and sprint planning for the next month. So it's a retrospective of the previous month and then planning for the next month. Then you sit down on the first day of the month. What we do is we do exchange gifts. The gifts can be super minor, trivial things. One month she gave me a remote control fart machine. And they can also be really extravagant gifts. One month she gave me a new car. So, plenty of art and jewelry and books and, those sorts of things that we do, but playful and with no stress. But you sort of exchange something at the beginning, which sets the tone. And then each person goes and first does a retrospective. So they talk about the previous month and you have a discussion about that. And then you have a sort of forward planning about the next month. And it's not what did we do, what are we doing? It's just whatever comes to mind. Again, I said they fall into two categories. One category is sort of just an update. Catch up on what's going on. We feel pretty in sync, and there's really nothing that's dramatic, but oftentimes we'll talk about a couple of things that are new and interesting and see where those conversations go. The other category is one where to use Keith's phrase, they're tough. Like something comes up, either looking backwards or looking forward, that's really bothering one of us, either about ourselves or about the other person, about our partner. And they're often unknown. They're often like a surprise, and sometimes they're even a surprise. Like if I start talking about something about myself, I'm surprised that I'm feeling that way. And the magic of it is to not try to solve a problem, not try to get resolution, but let the conversation just unfold until you sort of have worn yourself out on it, until you've finished. And the finish could be a logical finish where you decide, okay, we're done talking about this now, we've solved it. Or it could just be, we've talked about this enough. I think we're both in sync on what's going on. An example of one that just happened, and it was a surprise to both of us, was the one we just had on March 1st. We went to a Mexican restaurant near us in Longmont called Mariposa. It's a typical, not particularly fancy Mexican restaurant, casual. I didn't really have anything on my mind as we sat down to dinner. We had just had a really intense experience the previous week with a health scare that I had that ended up not being serious, but was sort of 24 hours of real anxiety around it. And as we sat down to start talking, and we started talking about, I said something that caused Amy to be really upset, and I would say angry. Her response to me was angry. And having been together as long as we've been together now, 27 years, I know that when she's angry at me, she's usually worried about something. So it's not so much that she's really angry about me, but something that I said or that I'm doing or that's going on is causing her anxiety. And so instead of escalating the argument, we've learned each other enough where when that happens, in some ways I just sort of slow it down and listen to what her anxiety is. And I don't say, hey, you're angry at me, what's your anxiety? But you have enough time and space to let that play out over chips and guacamole and the meal, because that's what the goal of that month is. The other real magical thing about it is during the course of the month, if you know that you're going to get together for life dinner on the first day of the month, if I do something that really pisses Amy off on the 22nd at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she doesn't feel the need to unload on me the next time she sees me, because she knows we'll have a chance to talk about it in a couple of days, and vice versa, of course. And the nice thing about that is, in the moment, things are usually way amplified more than they are after you've had them sit for a couple of days. And so instead of having these constant, ups and downs sort of shoved in between all of the other crazy shit that happens in life, you can store it up for a couple of days. It doesn't mean I always store it up. Like, there's plenty of things I do that cause an immediate reaction. But the end result of it is that you end up having this cadence of never really being out of sync for more than this 30-day window, because you always have this chance at the beginning of the month to get re in sync.
Thanks. So you all who are here with us, feel free to ask some questions. And while you're thinking of it, I want to share one from online. An entrepreneur spends years on a startup. It fails, and now you need a real job. What's your advice for transitioning back onto the job market? Where do entrepreneurs fit best? And do companies devalue an entrepreneur as a jack of all trades, master of none?
I'll give my kidding answer. Don't do it. Start another company. That's just kidding, though. I get that some people are going to need to do that. I haven't heard a lot about the entrepreneurs being devalued as jack of all trades. That's interesting. I'd love to hear some stories of that if you have. But at a minimum, right, larger companies are going to have innovation focus, or groups that spend their time on new products. I mean, many entrepreneurs would fit great into those contexts, at a minimum. So, I think, there are so many roles out there, and for engineers, one of the phrases I often use with engineers that are starting companies, and they say, well, what if it fails, is, gosh, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? That's a phrase that a mentor of mine has said to me many times. What's the worst thing that could happen? And when you really think about that, often for someone who's an engineer, for example, it's, well, you'd go get a job and probably be paid a lot because you're a good engineer. So, don't maybe be as afraid of it. But I think that, it's like any transition. You can go into it and find a role that fits you. There are an infinite number of roles in the world, and maybe an innovation role could be an interesting one. In fact, Techstars works with a lot of corporations that have these types of roles. But, I think if you're in marketing, right, you'll find a marketing role. And I don't know that I hear a lot of that kind of bias, but maybe it exists, and I'm not sure.
Well, the thing I'd add to it is, the first time you're an entrepreneur and you fail, you often carry around the weight of that failure much more and much longer than everybody around you does. And even just having the self-awareness that that's going on can be helpful. If you are in a financial situation where you need to have a job quickly, you should. But if you're not in a financial situation, or you're in a financial situation where you don't need to immediately start the next company or have a regular paycheck after your company fails, giving yourself a little bit of time, you know, weeks, months, without committing to the next thing, it can be very, very powerful. Again, there's plenty of people who don't have the luxury of that from an economic perspective, and that's fine. But if you have the luxury of that, take advantage of it, because it's so hard to understand when you're in the process of shutting down your company, how much weight you're carrying around it that nobody else is noticing. And you know, you feel bad about yourself, you feel bad about the company, you're processing what's going on, and the rest of the world is just doing what the rest of the world is doing. And sometimes just letting there be some time to pass is really, really helpful.
I would add that very practically, like go to another startup. I see a lot of startup founders, when they fail, go work for startups. That's an excellent place to start. I also see a lot of startup founders that come out of corporations. And one thing I do when I talk to corporations is make sure they understand that should be celebrated. It's good if someone wants to leave to start something up, and if they fail, to invite them back in. And I think that, you know, more healthy startup communities are better at that. And so maybe in some, you know, bigger cities like Seattle or Boulder, that might be more common. But in Birmingham, when I talk to corporations here, it's make sure we celebrate when people leave, even if they leave their good corporate job. And if they might fail, they probably will fail, and let them back in if that happens. So
just want to point out that Birmingham's twice the population of Boulder, just for the record.
All right. Hey, thank you guys for taking the time today. Regardless of the healthy habits that I've set up for myself, and I've done a lot of that kind of introspective inner work to really get a better balance so that I can manage the founder life. But I still sometimes find myself in that startup trough of sorrow, right? And what is it that you do now? No matter how much you do this, no matter how much you practice, we're always going to find ourselves back there. So what do you do when you get to the really bad days, the bad place, to pull yourself back out when the regular healthy habits just don't seem to cut it on those days? Thanks.
I'll start with the cliche. This too shall pass. And the very first time I was depressed, my biggest fear was that I would feel this way for the rest of my life. And, I was really depressed for about 2 years. And I functioned very well. I was highly functional at work and did everything I needed to do. And it used up all my energy just to get through the day. And nothing else in my life had any joy anywhere. Just the way I describe my own experience of depression is a complete and total absence of joy. And so when I was in that mode, and then I had the depression lift, which I didn't do anything to have it lift, it just lifted. That was profound for me because it was a reminder of this too shall pass. I think it's easy to say, it's hard to relate to, but and everybody has their own belief system about what happens when you die. My belief system when you die is that that's the end. And so I view that whatever things we're involved in are temporary. And that includes those days that are just shitty, or those experiences that are overwhelming, or those profound disappointments, or those moments of incredible stress, or that point at which you made a decision that you immediately regretted, or 24 hours later was the wrong decision. Like all time will just keep marching forward. And so for me, I let myself know that I'm going to make, in the sum total of my existence on this planet, I'm going to have many of those moments that don't feel good. And that, the ideal life is not to never have those moments. The ideal life, at least for me, or an ideal life, maybe ideal is the wrong word, but a successful life is to know that that's going to be part of it and to do my best to navigate my way through it. And I have an optimistic profile and an optimistic personality. So in some ways it's easier because I'm optimistic that tomorrow will be better when I'm having a shitty day. In 2001, just as an example, by mid-year, every day had been worse than the previous day. The internet bubble deflating was so miserable that just the work that I was doing every day, some new thing came up that I just couldn't get ahead of the misery across all the companies I was involved in. And by mid-June, I woke up one morning and I said, you know what, I'm going to change my attitude. It's not, okay, it's a new day, today's better than yesterday. It's like, you know what, today's probably going to be shittier than yesterday. Let's see what the world's got. And I just changed my attitude, right? Another one, I wrote a blog post about this a while ago, and one of the persistently popular ones is, I'm involved in a bunch of companies. I probably have, across our portfolio, we have, 75 or 80 companies, indirectly hundreds of companies. And the post I wrote, the title is "Something New is Fucked Up in My World Every Day." And, when you're in a single company, it may not be that dramatic, right? You go through phases where things are going well, and then you have phases where things are not going well. But when you're an investor in a whole bunch of companies, you get presented with something new, totally fucked up every day. And by the way, it doesn't replace the thing that was fucked up yesterday. That's probably still going on that you're having to deal with. And so I gave myself permission to have the attitude of, there's going to be some new fucked up thing every day. And that's okay. And I don't have to like it, but that's just going to be part of the reality of it. And that then makes it less emotionally charged, right? And it allows me as an investor and as an entrepreneur to just address the issue and do my best with it versus have an emotional response to the thing that's going on. Now, I'm not a savant. I have plenty of emotional responses to things that happen. But I think over time you can train yourself so that the emotional response to the thing that happens in the moment is less extreme good and less extreme bad, and that you look at it over a longer period of time about what you're doing and how you're interacting with people, and then back to your own value system yourself. So that's how I think about it, right? This too shall pass, and bad shit's gonna happen every day. And that's just part of being a human being. Okay.
I think it's well said, Brad. And one of the things I just really quickly would add is, the function of sleep is the processing of emotion. And it was mentioned earlier. And so just go take a few days off and sleep a lot. And I find that these things, you get a fresh perspective on them. You process the emotion. When you literally or figuratively hit a wall, hopefully you have a co-founder or someone in your world that's going to be up when you're down, optimistic when you're pessimistic. But I find that sleep helps you get to the next day, and it's pretty important.
And please don't suffer alone. Share with other people, talk to the people around you. I think when I'm in my most depressed is when I'm not communicating to other people while I'm struggling. And so on your hardest days, disconnect, go talk to somebody.
Guys, well, thank you.
All right, let's take another one from the online.
Yes to what Jason typed into the chat box. Jason just typed, isn't it amazing what sleep, healthy eating, and exercise can do? And the answer is yes. And all that shit between our ears that we create is all the narratives about what's going on and why it's happening and who. That's all us creating that narrative. And just make sure that we're doing the things to let us process it.
And I have a, that's loud. I have a I have a question for you guys. We're talking about lows, but I often find that I like to compare it to a roller coaster. So the lows are lower than any sort of day job, but the highs are higher as well. And it seems to me as a founder, you can kind of ride that ride and take the peaks and the valleys and really embrace them, or you can try to pull it down into a middle range. And I'm curious for you guys in the terms of pattern recognition and watching founders go through that process time and time again and have to make those decisions of do I celebrate but not think I'm killing it all the time, and do I realize that tomorrow's another day and whatever shitty thing just happened is going to pass, or do you just lean into both of those things and feel both those things? And in looking at different entrepreneurs and the hundreds and thousands that you've interacted with, what seems to work best for people?
David, do you want to go first on this one instead of Nick?
Sure, I'm thinking because I think it's an interesting question. I think the first thought I had was a lot of times the highs and lows are interspersed, right? I mean, they could be at the same time on the same day. And that's one of the things that's so hard, as there's good news and there's 3 bad things happening too, right? And that is entrepreneurship. As far as what, when you asked about techniques, I mean, what do people do? Where I've seen a lot of struggles, and I've seen it in my very close friend group, and is sort of you go around the room and you do these red, yellow, green check-ins, and it's like, yeah, I'm green. Everybody's green all the time, right? Everything's good, and you're trying to be optimistic even in the face of something that is okay to feel bad about, right? And I think that's one of the essences of leadership, is being willing to be vulnerable in that way and say, I'm really disappointed about this, or I'm bummed out, that this happened and I'm feeling bad, and have your team, pull you up. And so some of it is like the technique that I've seen be powerful is just being vulnerable to it and not trying to just always pretend everything is great, which I think a lot of founders try to do. And so it's okay, right, is part of it. And just sometimes the only role I play in the portfolio is just listening to someone tell me about what's going on in their world, and just, helping validate that that's okay to feel. And, I think when you crush that in, it builds up, and it doesn't release until it comes out in a very bad way years later. So just have an outlet for it.
Nick.
Yeah, well, I would say that I feel like, yes, there's a roller coaster. I feel like I'm the worst leader when I'm kind of subjecting the people around me to that roller coaster. And it's kind of like sleeping, eating, exercising. Like, it sounds simple, but my very best days, and I'm passionate about Techstars. I'm passionate about startups. I'm a passionate person. But my very best days are when I'm passionate about the thing, but really dispassionate about the execution. And for me, that's as simple as I come in and I make a list and I do the first thing. And then I take a breath and then I do the second thing. And I do the third thing. And I go down the list, and when the list is over, I'm done. And it's the execution itself, like I'm not all up and down on the execution. But yeah, I'm a list maker, and my best days are when I'm just making list items and knocking them off.
I think the longer I've done this, the roller coaster never goes away. But my interest in the roller coaster has disappeared. And so in some ways, there's this non-attachment to the ups and downs. It's a little bit of what Nate said, like a different version, but the same kind of thing, which is, I definitely have moments that are woohoo, and I definitely have moments that are oh shit, and they're just moments on a continuum of experience that stretches out over a long period of time. And I used to attribute a lot of emotional value positive and negative to those moments. And it's not to say that when a good thing happens, I'm not happy, and a bad thing happens, I'm not unhappy. But I allow myself to feel the emotion, but I then don't vest a lot of importance with it. Because what's really important is time is going to keep moving. It's easy, for me, it's been easy in business to do that. I've gotten to the place, and I've had a lot of, I think David could say the same thing, the same way. We've had a lot of success in lots of different things. We've had a lot of failure in lots of different things. Over some period of time, not just in a single company, but across lots of different things, you start to develop a way of processing it that is not as vested in emotion. I find that much harder to do outside of business. I find it much harder to do when I find myself having a reaction, positive or negative, to my parents, or a reaction positive or negative to, what a friend has done. Again, both directions. And many of my friends are people I have business relationships too. So I find the personal dimension of that much harder to process in a non-attached way. But the business side of it, I've found that the more non-attached I can be, I agree with the comment, the better I feel as a leader. When my emotion is not the thing that people are seeing or reacting to. By the way, a caveat on that is when really good things happen, acknowledging them is really useful. And when really bad things happen, acknowledging them is really useful. But curling up in a ball in the corner of the office is not useful. And, going to the bar across the street and getting tequila shots for everybody, also at the other end of the spectrum, probably not useful, like whatever the random, overexcited thing is. Like, celebrate the successes, but then next.
All right, we've got another from online. What if accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces, etc., make mental health and group sessions a mandatory part of the programs? Worst case scenario, you waste an hour of someone's time who doesn't think they need it. More likely, you'll save some lives and let founders know how normal and common their struggles are.
Yeah, I think it's a great thought. And I know that some of our accelerator programs do exactly that. The word mandatory was all caps, which I get. I think the video content series that I mentioned earlier, one of the things that happens is Techstars is, for those that aren't familiar with it, right? It's this like 3-month craziness. I think most of you probably are, but it's a natural state for 3 months, right? And there's so much to get done. And so what we've been doing is moving content that we want them to watch before they arrive into these videos, and we're having them very professionally done. So this is something we are launching in May for the whole startup community globally to hopefully benefit from. Brought in lots of experts and sort of made it pretty practical, I think. And so we will be having them watch those before they ever show up, and then as part of orientation, there'll be a discussion about them. But they're there for reference as well, which I think is very powerful. But I do think everyone who has sort of a context like this can play a role in helping, destigmatize it, right? This is a thing that can happen to you. It can be right after the COVID session that you teach, right? This could happen to you. Here's what to do. Wash your hands. Hey, this can happen to you. It's something we should talk about. And, making very clear where there are resources. Because often in a accelerator context, it's not so easy to go to your managing director and say, hey, I'm struggling with something, right? You want to talk to someone that maybe is a little disconnected from that context, or that has more of a background there, or just chat with someone quickly. And so we want to make sure that they know where those resources are too, and that they're totally available to people. But I do think everyone needs to be thinking about this, and I do think normalizing it is an important point. So it's well said.
one of the things about therapy, whether it's psychotherapy or psychiatry, separate from coaching, by the way, is it's very hard to make it mandatory for someone. The people who often need it the most are the ones who resist it the most. And one of the things that most good therapists will say is that there is a moment at which a person either accepts that they need some help and they take a referral, or a clinical doctor encourages them or a family member encourages them. And there is a very different experience therapeutically when you've chosen to participate than when you're told you have to participate. And I worry a little bit about mandatory in the context of entrepreneurship and in the context of accelerators. I personally think the context that David describes is really important, embracing it, making it safe, making it available, making it extremely easy to access, modeling, that kind of behavior for others, but still acknowledging that, a lot of people, many people are either not ready for it or not able to engage in whatever place they are. So I just think there's a balance that has to be walked carefully around that. That said, I think that, I know what Techstars is working on broadly across the startup community, and I know it's been rolled out in a handful of places. And I'm very proud of the leadership that Techstars is taking here. I think it's going to be very, very visible across the startup community. There are a few other investor side organizations who have also done this, provide real leadership. One of them is a firm called Freestyle that provides access to, they'll underwrite 2 different programs right now, and they're going to do more for every company, every founder in a company they invest in. One is something called the Hoffman Institute, which is a program around really sort of going deep on some of your childhood traumas and understanding them in the context of your current life. It's become it's been around for a while, but in the last few years, it's become a pretty popular program, especially among entrepreneurs. And then a company called Meru Health, MERU, which provides a 12-week, once a week, hour-long online therapy, psychology, therapeutic access session, and they're underwriting this, right? So they're saying you don't have to do it to be in our portfolio, but we'll pay for it. Here it is. This is really easy to do. And I think we'll see more and more things like that roll out to make it accessible, especially as the stigma of it decreases. By the way, coaching, which is not therapy, but is in the same universe, in a business context, has become very popular in the last 5 or 6 years. When coaching started, maybe a decade ago, in entrepreneurial circles, it was kind of routinely mocked. I would say a lot of people were very like, why would I, the investor, have the company pay for you, the CEO, this money for you to have a coach? That doesn't make any sense to me. And today we're on the other side. Virtually, not every CEO, but many CEOs and many founders have coaches, and many executives have coaches in startups and fast-growing companies, and it's very much a normal thing. So I think sort of getting the right balance between making people do it and making it easily available and modeling clear behavior around it is what's key.
Thanks. So coming up on the time that we had set together, you guys want to take another question, or if not, we'll switch gears into learning about some local resources that a therapist among us has pulled together.
I would say it's 5:45 my time, and I had us till 5:45, so I'm timing out. I mean, maybe could do one more question, but I think we're kind of done, at least for me. I don't know what David and Nate's Is.
Yeah, just an invitation to reach out. I mean, if any of us are pretty easy to reach, and I'm David at Techstars.com. I'm sure everybody else is happy to have you reach out, so please do.
Brad at Feld.com, so anytime.
Same here. Thank you.
You can reach Nate at Brad Feld. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, Brad at Feld.com. Nate.Schmidt at Techstars.com. Email me anytime.
Thanks for organizing this. It's fun, and good luck with the rest of the evening.
Joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, so the rest of you remote participants, stick with us if you want to hear some resources that we've pulled together. I'll hand it over to Rachel.
Hi guys. Ooh, that is loud. I'll be quick because we've just listened to a lot of good information. Yeah, I wanted to pull together a couple of resources because I find that sometimes people don't know where to start when they are thinking about how they might want to access mental health services for themselves. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and CEO and founder of my company as well. So, so this is something that is in my wheelhouse. Good. Okay. Cool. So I just have these and I'll just pass them around. This is about 15 to 16 local Atlanta therapists that specialize in entrepreneurship and founder mental health. I put their address, their website, the fee that they charge, and what insurances they accept. And I just thought it might be helpful if anybody wants it. And then this is just some tips, my own disclaimer. I said take this all with a grain of salt because it's just one therapist's opinion, but it's how to find a therapist. The three main online resources are Psychology Today, Good Therapy, and then Open Path Collective is definitely one that you guys would want. They're really committed to low, reasonable rates. So all the therapists who are part of Open Path have agreed to a rate between $30 to $80 an hour. And they have tons of Atlanta therapists. One of the benefits of being in a bigger city is that there's plenty of therapists on Open Path Collective and these are in-person sessions. They might have a remote option. And then, maybe I'll just say a few words about accessing health insurance because it's, there's not parity between physical health and mental health in our healthcare system today. So a lot of insurance providers don't accept insurance. I have insurance for my company, and the mental health package is that you can have 3 sessions at such and such rate with only someone who's a licensed psychologist, which is usually a higher rate. So it's just kind of difficult sometimes. And the reason behind that is because therapists haven't been given a raise from insurance companies in 7 years. And so most therapists are beginning to not accept insurance anymore. So therapy is just very expensive, unfortunately. You can look to pay my therapist is $190 and she's worth every penny, but it's a lot. So when you would want to call your insurance company and just ask if mental health or behavioral health services are covered, ask what your copay is, how many sessions are covered, and what type of credential the therapist has to have. I put down some good questions to ask when you're vetting a therapist. You should interview 3. I interviewed 3 to find out who's going to fit well with me. They give you a free phone consultation to just see if it's a good fit. And then a lot of therapists, when they decided to not take insurance anymore, began saying that they would take out of network. So that's on there as well. There's a couple of out of network therapists, but that just means that they're passing on the paperwork of insurance to you. So they will give you a receipt and then you have to file it with your insurance company and get reimbursement. It's a really kind of frustrating process. It's a really big problem that there's not more parity between what providers or insurance companies, payers will pay for. Yeah, and then I put a few acronyms on there just so that you guys know the mental health hierarchy. Psychiatrists are the top. They're medical doctors. They're the only ones who can prescribe medication. You have a 15-minute session with them. Usually they don't usually have great bedside manner. They just do kind of a symptom check. You don't really need to see a psychiatrist for medication if you are experiencing low level mood disorder, depression, anxiety. It's like psychiatrists really important if it's a more severe, persistent mental illness like bipolar, schizophrenia, or any kind of like psychosis type stuff. So psychiatrists and psychologists, they think they're better than therapists. It's fine. But they have a doctorate in psychology, and they're the only ones who can do psychological testing. So if you have, a child who has ADHD, they're the only ones who can diagnose ADHD through a psychological test. Other kinds of psychological tests, they do that. And then master's level clinicians are licensed clinical social workers, LCSWs, LMFTs, and LPCs, licensed professional counselors. So all of those have master's degree, and they went through a process to get their license. And then last two things I'll mention, app-based therapy is on the rise. So BetterHelp and Talkspace are the two main ones. They do mostly text-based therapy. My personal opinion is I don't really care for it that much because you have constant access to your therapist, and it's kind of like missing the point of therapy, which is to be able to handle your emotions on your own in between sessions. So that's just my own personal opinion. I'm sure that they've been very helpful. They're not good in a crisis. You should seek definitely like an in-person meeting, or at least a video call for crisis situations. So that's all I got. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has afterwards, but these are here for you if you would like anything. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. So that's it for the remote participants. You've got our emails. I'm Keith at fraudmark.com. You got the emails of the people who really know this stuff, Brad and David, so reach out to them. The rest of us, we've got some food, we've got some games, so feel free to hang out. And thanks so much for all the organizers who have helped us today. It wouldn't have been possible without the community, with Techstars and many others. So we're gonna do this more often and just work towards having authentic conversations with one another, because we're fighting so many of the exact same struggles, and just really look forward to it. So thanks for coming.